The story kicks off in an old Chinese city inside the Black Snake sect. A shadowy figure walks straight toward the main gate, while lightning cracks in the sky above. The sect members are already lined up and waiting. Swords and spears are pointed forward, bodies stiff under the pouring rain. Their faces show pure hate, teeth gritted, murder in their eyes. The second he steps into view, they charge as one, throwing everything they've got. The mysterious man stops without a flinch. His hand drifts slowly to his sword hilt. Then in a blink, the blade flashes out. The front wave drops instantly, bodies hitting the ground like trash. He cuts through them cold and clean, eyes locked on the rest. Panic hits the survivors hard. They back off quick and try to rethink their plan. They yell and rush him again, coming from every side this time. He stomps the ground so hard the stone splits under his foot. Using the bounce, he shoots forward like a shadow and rips right through the pack. Next thing, he's standing face to face with the last ones left, gripping his sword in both hands. One hard swing, and a head flies off, blood mixing with the rain. The others think they see a chance and swing from behind. One guy jumps high, spear aimed dead at the man's back. Sure, he's got the kill. But before the tip even gets close, a scream rips through the storm. A bright flash, and the spear guy's head tumbles off his shoulders. In his last split-second thought, he looks totally lost. How the hell did the sword come from behind? The mysterious man showed no reaction. The rain softened and silence settled over the scene. Broken weapons lay scattered among fallen bodies. At the center of the destruction, only the mysterious man remained standing, surrounded by corpses, shattered steel, and the ruins of what had once been the Black Snake sect's entrance. Meanwhile, within the sect's palace, another mysterious figure waited. He was an elderly man dressed in white, a snake tattoo etched across his back. A blade rested calmly at his side, and a faint smile lingered on his face, as though he had long anticipated this moment. The space before him stood empty. Thunder cracked, and in the next instant, the mysterious man appeared directly in front of him. The two figures studied each other in silence. The old man was the first to break it, acknowledging that the figure before him was the one known as the Nameless Hero. The mysterious man offered no verbal response. His hands shifted slowly behind his back, his grip tightening around a second blade. The old man laughed, remarking that someone called a hero should not appear so restrained. In response, the mysterious man stated that he was not a hero at all. The answer caught the old man off guard, prompting him to question why the man had been eliminating members of the Black Snake sect. At that moment, the mysterious man fully revealed his face. From the old man's reaction alone, it became clear that he understood one thing with certainty. The man before him was not driven by heroism. Still, the meaning behind his words remained unclear. Confusion overtook him, and he burst into laughter, covering his face with his hands, convinced that the mysterious man had deceived everyone. The mysterious man dismissed that notion, making it clear that no deception had taken place. People had simply chosen to see him as they wished. His appearance and movement were unusual, almost absurd, yet his presence carried undeniable intent. Without warning, the old man extended his hand toward his blade. A blue aura surged through his body as he acknowledged the mysterious man's intrigue. As he began to draw his snake-shaped weapon, he declared that crossing the river of the dead that day would leave him without regret. With killing intent rising, he challenged the mysterious man directly, stating that regardless of titles or legends, the purpose was the same. One of them was there to kill the other. The old man's expression resembled that of a viper, cold and predatory. Opposite him, the mischievous man tightened his grip on his sword with both hands as a red aura began to pulse through his body. At the same time, a purple-blue aura surged from the old man, both presences colliding before a single strike was made. For a moment, time itself seemed to halt. Rain droplets lingered in the air as the two figures stood facing one another, each waiting for the instant to move. When the rain finally fell, the mischievous man burst forward at full speed. The old man followed immediately, his gaze sharp and venomous. Beneath the pouring rain, they clashed relentlessly. Steel rang against steel again and again, the force of their battle echoing beyond the dark walls of the Black Snake sect. The fight raged without pause until at last it came to an end. The mischievous man remained standing. Blood coated his blade as he stepped out of the sect grounds. He slid the sword back into his sheath, a faint smirk forming on his face as thunder rolled overhead. In the flash of lightning, his features were fully revealed. It was the face of a psychopath. To understand the story, it must return far into the past. A single petal fell into a barrel filled with blood. Beside it lay a corpse, while blood streamed steadily down a flight of stairs. Footsteps soon echoed through the space as figures advanced upward along the blood-soaked steps. The sound multiplied, revealing not one or two, but countless people ascending together. As the view widened, a vast host came into sight, marching beneath raised flags, each bearing different sect emblems upon their backs, all climbing toward a towering ancient sect. At the forefront stood four individuals, a monk, an old man, and two other men. The monk stared at the carnage in disbelief and stated that the martyr had foretold such an end for those who possessed forbidden knowledge. Bodies of sect members were scattered across the ground like slaughtered beasts. Some had been dragged across the floor, while others had been cut down where they stood. The sight was so horrific that the monk struggled to look away, and the others were left equally shaken by the devastation before them. The short old man screamed in disbelief, declaring that such devastation could only be the work of a demon, cursing whatever monstrous being could have produced such an abomination. The other old man beside him raised his hand, signaling him to stop, stating calmly that someone was approaching. Beneath the scattered pile of rocks, a lone figure was still standing. Against all odds, he remained alive, moving forward step by step. His legs trembled violently as he advanced. His body was cold and drenched in blood. The blade he carried was shattered, his sword broken, and his clothing torn apart, revealing countless wounds. With what little strength he had left, he announced that the mortal sect had been completely annihilated. The old man shouted in shock, recognizing him as the Plum Blossom Swordmaster and questioning how he could still be alive. The man, barely clinging to life, blood spilling from his body, declared weakly that the destruction had been caused by only a single individual. Without warning, an intense pink light erupted from the direction where the Plum Blossom Master had last appeared. Panic spread through the gathered sect members as warnings were shouted, urging them to block the advancing presence. In the next instant, a violent explosion tore through the area. Bodies and severed limbs were hurled through the air as the force rippled outward. Through the settling dust and debris, one man managed to see the Plum Blossom Master split cleanly in two. A furious cry rang out, demanding that the attacker reveal himself. Moments later, a lone figure emerged, walking forward at an unhurried pace while carrying a severed head. He advanced toward the assembled warriors, calmly observing them. Among the crowd, he recognized familiar representatives from Shaolin, Wudang, Chongqing, and Nonghong. It became clear that the massacre had been carried out by a very young boy. He appeared genuinely surprised by the size of the force assembled against him. He wielded a long blade and wore the attire of the Taonhong sect. An enraged elder shouted at him, demanding silence and answers, seeking to know his identity and the reason behind the slaughter. The boy merely scratched his head, explaining that he had come after hearing that Matra was the strongest. Then he paused and let the severed head drop to the ground at the feet of the crowd. Blood streamed down his body as he calmly concluded that rumors were unreliable. The monk examined the severed head and recognized it as belonging to the elder of the Manhwa sect. The realization spread through the gathered crowd. The young boy raised his blade and directed it toward them, stating that since they had all gathered in such numbers, their combined strength must surpass that of the Matra sect. The words ignited their fury. Faces twisted with rage likened to roaring dragons as weapons were lifted one after another. Sect symbols and stances were revealed as they declared their intent to kill him on the spot and appease the fallen souls of Manhua. The four elders charged forward in unison, unleashing their full power and magical attacks toward the nameless swordsman. He remained still, releasing a quiet sound of surprise as he observed them. Internally, he acknowledged that the situation was genuinely entertaining as he locked his gaze onto the four swordsmen closing in. The scene shifted. A man wearing a mysterious goggle over one eye appeared. A faint smirk crossed his face as he lifted his hand to the device, deciding to remove it. He exhaled slowly while gripping his neck, questioning whether facing a combined assault from so many opponents was still overwhelming for him. As the goggle came off, a cassette fell to the floor, revealing the recording of what he had been watching. The scene shifted again. The experience was described as a recently developed virtual reality game, infamous for extreme gore, including severed limbs, decapitations, and relentless violence. The content had sparked widespread outrage, leading to countless complaints demanding the service be shut down. The mysterious boy, once known as the Nameless Swordsman, stared at the cassette and reflected that no other game compared to it. He concluded that a more discreet approach would be necessary next time as he continued to look at the television. On the screen, a breaking news report appeared. The reporter announced that Mr. Ho of Darrell Corporation was missing and that assassination was suspected. The Nameless Swordsman reacted when a weak voice echoed from another room pleading for help. He turned his head toward the sound and calmly acknowledged it before standing up. He picked up an object from behind his chair, its surface resembling skin, and walked toward the source of the voice as the pleading continued. Inside the dark room, a man sat slumped on the floor. Dried blood pooled beneath him, while fresh blood ran down his face. As the light shifted, his condition became clear, one eye swollen shut, tears pouring from the other, sweat soaking his body as he begged desperately for mercy. The mysterious boy sat down in front of him, staring coldly. It became evident that the object in his hand was a hammer. He questioned whether the man truly wanted his help, and then seized the man's face, pressing his cheek with overwhelming force. The man cried out in confusion and fear, claiming he did not know why he had been kidnapped and insisting that he had done nothing wrong. His voice rose as he sobbed and pleaded. The mysterious man, once the swordsman within the game, released his grip as the man lowered his head. Photographs were then thrown onto the floor before him. The images revealed scenes of brutal murders, showing women and men treated as mere playthings. The sight was unmistakably horrific. The man's fear twisted into rage as he demanded to know how such evidence had been obtained. The mysterious man responded calmly, making it clear that innocence would have kept the man from ever becoming his target. Faced with the images, the man broke down again, shouting that he was repenting and begging for his life as tears streamed down his face. The mysterious man grabbed him and hurled him aside. He spoke with cold indifference, questioning why the man was so familiar with begging for mercy, and remarking that hearing such words had grown tiresome regardless of who spoke them. He raised the hammer and seized the man's head, swinging with brutal force. Before the blow could land, the man lunged forward and struck the mysterious boy in the stomach with all the strength he had left. The boy was thrown backward toward the entrance of the room. The man tore free from the ropes, binding his hands, and rose to his feet, teeth grinding as rage overtook his fear. He shouted threats and seized the hammer the boy had intended to use on him. The boy responded with a smirk. The man charged forward, screaming as he swung the hammer with lethal intent. The boy avoided the strike effortlessly, allowing the hammer to crash into the floor. When the man looked up, terror filled his eyes. In a single motion, the boy drove a brutal punch into the man's stomach and followed with a powerful kick to his face. The impact sent the man flying across the room where he slammed into the floor. His face was completely deformed. Both eyes were swollen shut, his cheeks and nose crushed, and broken teeth spilled from his mouth. He screamed incoherently, begging for distance and mercy, repeating that he did not want to die as his body trembled uncontrollably. The mysterious man finally spoke. He explained that most humans were herbivorous by nature, while a minority were carnivores. Those carnivores attacked, hunted, and devoured the weak. He stated that his role was to hunt those predators. His eyes were cold and merciless as he declared himself a hunter, intent on destroying those who preyed upon others. The man glanced toward a corpse lying across the room and erupted in hysterical screams. Horror twisted his expression as he crawled backward, desperately trying to escape. He continued shouting for the hunter to stay away as the distance between them closed. Suddenly, the door burst open. Armed men rushed into the room and shouted commands for both individuals to freeze. The hunter halted mid-motion as the men flooded the space. One of them announced that the hunter was under arrest on suspicion of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and murder. The hunter reacted with amusement, realizing this was how the authorities had located the place. Gunshots rang out, accompanied by warnings that live ammunition was being used. The hunter looked down at the points where the bullet struck him. The scene blurred slightly as he lifted his gaze toward the armed men. A sense of familiarity surfaced in his mind. He smiled. The hunter stated that the man had murdered 6 women, subjecting them to torture, photographing them while doing so, and killing them afterward. The man on the floor broke down completely, sobbing as tears streamed down his face. The hunter went on to indicate that many of the armed men standing there wore identical uniforms, yet were murderers themselves. He described them as animals, carnivores who hunted ordinary people. He defined himself as a hunter who preyed on such creatures, making it clear that their outrage was misplaced and that the true target of their anger should have been the man lying on the floor. One of the armed men aimed his weapon while casually lighting a cigarette with his free hand. He dismissed Hunter's word, stating that all he saw was a psychopathic murderer who kidnapped and killed people. The hunter responded with bitter amusement, acknowledging that speaking to law enforcement had been pointless from the start. His grip tightened around the hammer, his hand trembling with intent. A warning was shouted, but it came too late. The hunter surged forward and brought the hammer down, killing the man instantly. As the blow landed, gunfire erupted. Another shot struck the hunter, and the world seemed to fracture. A thought surfaced clearly in his fading consciousness. If another life were granted, it should be one filled with beasts he could kill without restraint. The bullet was shown tearing toward his chest. As it pierced his heart, realization settled in, the moment aligning perfectly, like a familiar mural finally understood. Memories flashed through his mind, him cleaning his blade, a blue aura filling the space around him. When the impact fully registered, his strength drained away, sweat poured from his body as he collapsed to the ground. The scene shifted once more. This time he was younger, as if reborn into another world. Confusion surfaced as he realized he was still conscious, despite having been shot. As that thought formed, a mysterious man approached and began to speak. The man sneered, surprised that the boy was still alive. He mocked him, recalling the effort it had taken to drag him from the marketplace, cursing the futility of the previous attack. He added that if he had been the hunter, the gunshot would have ended him for sure, and then threatened that he would face certain death tomorrow. He threw the boy against a wall covered in dried plants, and the impact sent him sprawling to the ground. His vision blurred. Shock and confusion clouded his senses. Reaching back, he grabbed a nearby stone, but a sudden wave of pain shot through his body. He collapsed to the ground, coughing violently as his body convulsed. While stretching out his arm, he noticed something unusual and sensed that something was wrong. Acting quickly, he reached for his clothing and tore it away to examine his condition. Dazed, he examined himself. The body was unfamiliar. Wounds marred his skin in ways he did not recognize. Slowly, he scanned the surroundings and then looked up at the sky. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He whispered the name aloud. Murim. Examining the markings around him, he realized they were written in the Murim script. A bright white light spilled through a doorway, illuminating his malnourished, frail form as he collapsed, pressing his hands against the floor. Tears streamed down his face as he clawed at his skin, whispering for his wish to have come true. Despite the anguish, a grim smile formed across his lips. A message appeared before him, suspended like a mirror in midair. Player Dong bonus. Welcome to Murim Online, the world where the strongest reside. His expression darkened, and a chilling, horrifying smile slowly spread across his face. The next scene shifted to the stable where Sung was occupied with cleaning the horses. His hands moved in a steady, practiced rhythm, scrubbing away filth without pause. His body no longer reacted to the stench or the strain. Both had long become familiar companions. Suddenly, the door burst open with a violent kick, swinging inward as if struck by a force of pure intent. Before the work was finished, Mel appeared behind him, immediately pinching his nose in open disgust. With an impatient gesture, he signaled for Sung to follow. The smell clearly offended him, yet the boy enduring it earned no sympathy. Another task awaited, and obedience was expected without delay. Sung hesitated, fully aware that the stable remained unfinished. That hesitation was answered with cruelty. Mel seized him roughly and reminded him of his place. As an orphan surviving solely on the Dan family's leftovers, Sung had no right to question orders. Resistance held no meaning. Dragged away, he was left with no option but to comply. They soon reached the blacksmith's workshop, where an elderly man stood among heaps of worn blades and broken weapons. A large, intimidating figure was already present. The blacksmith questioned why Mel was absent and why Dong Yu had come instead. Dong Yu dismissed the question with ease, implying that Mel was busy indulging himself somewhere, free of any real responsibility. The explanation failed to impress. The blacksmith's focus remained on the task. The work was described as simple, yet merciless, moving an enormous pile of rusted swords and shattered weapons. The blacksmith remarked that such labor would be difficult for only two people. Dong Yu found the comment amusing, His laughter echoed through the workshop as he declared that they already possessed the perfect beast of burden. Without warning, he drove a brutal kick into Sung's back, sending him crashing to the ground. Sung lay there, gasping for air, the breath knocked clean from his lungs. Dongyu demanded movement, ordering the boy to stand and begin working. His voice carried impatience, sharpened by malice. As he rubbed his hands together, he casually reconsidered his own plans and decided that Sung would handle the entire task alone. Satisfied with that decision, he turned and left the workshop, abandoning the boy where he had fallen. The blacksmith watched in silence. Pity and unease flickered briefly across his aged face, but they faded just as quickly. In the end, he chose inaction, allowing the boy's suffering to continue without interference. With no one left to depend on, Sung forced himself upright and began lifting the heavy sacks of weapons onto his back. The weight crushed down on him, far beyond what his frail body could bear. He staggered forward, collapsed, and rose again, over and over, each fall followed by sheer will dragging him back to his feet. His body trembled violently, his breathing shallow and uneven, yet he refused to stop. The old blacksmith eventually acknowledged the effort. Observing how pale Sung would become, he suggested that the boy rest, noting that his condition had grown dangerously unstable, as though collapse was inevitable. Sung insisted he could continue, but his body betrayed him. His vision blurred with every step, sounds warped and stretched, drifting in and out of reach. From somewhere impossibly distant, he heard his name being called. Within his fading consciousness, a voice questioned whether this wretched existence was all his life would ever amount to. The question lingered unanswered. Unable to endure any longer, Sung finally collapsed, exhaustion consuming him completely. When his eyes opened again, the world was no longer the same. A towering shadow stood before him, radiating crushing pressure and unmistakable hostility. Dazed and hollow, Sung reacted weakly. Before comprehension could form, an overwhelming force struck him, a blow so massive it swallowed all sensation. As pain surged, fragments of memory surfaced. He remembered losing his family to a violent typhoon. He remembered standing before the Dan family's gate, begging for the chance to survive. With every imagined strike, the humiliation he had suffered in that household replayed relentlessly. Gradually, a devastating realization settled in. His entire existence felt like an error. From the moment he had been born into this world, something terribly wrong had gone on. Deep within his consciousness, the mysterious presence pleaded desperately to be saved. Reality snapped back. Psalm lay on the cold, stable floor, his body shattered beyond what it should have endured. Yet his eyes now glowed with a chilling red light. A twisted smile spread slowly across his face. As he rose to his feet, he was no longer the same as before. His movements were steady, deliberate, filled with purpose. Without hesitation, he walked back into the stable. Catching his reflection in the water, he recalled the name of the body he now inhabited. Salzam. A cough escaped him as pain surged through the fragile frame. This body was thin, damaged, and on the verge of collapse. The filthy, cramped stable confirmed it. This was the same place as before. That was when the truth became clear. The original Salzam had died from the beating. What now occupied this body was someone else entirely. As the realization struggled to settle, something strange appeared before him. A massive blue screen materialized in midair, glowing vividly as it welcomed him to Murim Online. The interface was unmistakable. A status window. A system. Its presence confirmed what he had already begun to suspect. Elsewhere in the village, Makal walked through the streets with a bowl of food in hand, muttering irritably under his breath. He complained about always being the one forced to clean up after others. His frustration deepened as he recalled how Salzam had crossed paths with Pang Dorian, a man infamous for his violent temper. That encounter had enraged the master, and Makal had been left to suffer the consequences. Dark thoughts briefly surfaced. He considered killing the boy outright, ending the problem permanently, but quickly abandoned the idea. The risk was far too high. Being caught would cost him his own life. Instead, he vented his anger by kicking open the stable door and flinging the bowl inside. The food scattered across the dirt floor, landing near Salzam. The boy remained silent. His glowing red eyes observed everything with unsettling calm. He began assessing his circumstances. 2 weeks had passed since he awakened in this world. During that time, he had quietly gathered information by listening to Makal and observing his surroundings. The first thing he learned was that the people spoke Chinese, yet this land was not China. Nearby, guards trained in a courtyard, swinging swords with inhuman speed. Fighters leapt through the air, moving faster than any normal body should allow. Entire formations shifted in flawless synchronization. Martial arts here were neither legend nor performance. They were real. Martial artists moved through the air, flying across the courtyard faster than anything Sawum had ever witnessed. One of the trainers stepped forward and began practicing his sword with intense focus. Once the others followed, movements aligned perfectly as all of them began practicing together, their strikes flowing in flawless synchronization. Sawum watched in silence. With every movement he observed, a realization settled deeper into his mind. Martial arts in this world were not techniques or performances. They were alive. This place was no imitation. It was not a story nor a myth. What stood before him was the real version of Murim Online. The second discovery was the system itself. The Murim Online status window functioned perfectly, yet only he could see it. Even with the system's presence, he understood that this world was not virtual. The people were not artificial creations. They thought, felt, suffered, and lived by their own will. They were not NPCs. As he stared at the glowing blue screen, he questioned whether he was human or merely a player. The answer no longer held meaning. This world was real, and that was enough. Suddenly, Dong Yu appeared at the entrance of the stable, his expression twisted with mockery and lingering rage. He approached, still bitter over being punished in Sawum's place. This time, however, Sawum rose to his feet without fear. Calmly, he picked up the spilled bowl and began eating the food directly from the ground, showing no hesitation at all. The act ignited Dong Yu's fury. He lunged forward in a blind attack, but Sawum reacted instantly, raising the bowl and blocking the strike with precise timing. Shock flickered across Dong Yu's face. Before he could recover, Sawum countered with a sharp, controlled punch. The red glow in his eyes intensified as he seized Dong Yu by the neck and slammed him into the ground with crushing force. In that moment, terror overtook Dong Yu. He understood that the boy he had tormented no longer existed. What stood before him now was something entirely different. Sawum showed no mercy. His fists descended again and again, each impact heavier than the last. Blood sprayed across the floor as resistance faded. The assault continued until Dong Yu could no longer move. Only then did Sawum stop. He stood amid the wreckage, a red aura rippling around him. Closing his eyes, he drew in a slow breath, reflecting on what he had done. Whether he was human or player no longer mattered. This world followed a single rule. Only the strong survived. Strength decided everything. Here there was no need to hide. He was not prey, he was a predator. Beyond the village stretched the jungle known as Gango, a land where even greater and more terrifying beasts roam freely. The thought of them brought a faint smile to his face. Once his body recovered, he would begin hunting again. For true predators, this world was not hell. It was paradise. And within the divine land of Murim, Sawum had finally found where he belonged. Returning to the present, he lowered himself beside Dong Yu's lifeless body to recover his strength. There was no satisfaction in killing someone so insignificant. Still, something important remained to be confirmed. With a calm expression, he turned his attention to the corpse, preparing to test a theory forming in his mind. The moment he focused, a familiar command activated. A massive blue screen materialized before his eyes. The inventory window opened instantly, flooding his vision with light. At first glance, a critical difference became clear. In Murim Online, inventory slots were rigid and segmented, each item confined to its own square. Here, the space was entirely different. One vast, seamless void. Curious, he slowly extended his hand into the floating screen. The sensation was unmistakably real. The interior space stretched endlessly, far exceeding 100 pons in volume. His gaze shifted from his own hand to Dong Yu's body, and a new idea quietly took shape. Recalling how the system once functioned in the game, he stepped closer to the corpse and pressed his hand against the man's face. The response was immediate. The body warped unnaturally, flickering like a corrupted image struggling to maintain form. In the next instant, blue light engulfed it, dragging it inward as though swallowed by an unseen void. Within seconds, Dong Yu's body vanished, without leaving the slightest trace. Sawum watched in stunned silence. The practicality of the ability became obvious at once. Disposing of bodies had never been simpler. A more dangerous thought soon followed, whether living beings could also be stored, and if so, whether they would remain alive inside. His expression turned contemplative. Further testing would be required. The scene shifted to the following day. In a crowded courtyard, several men stood chatting casually while Sawum swept the ground nearby. His movements appeared slow and obedient, yet his awareness remained sharp. Two guards nearby exchanged gossip, laughing openly as they spoke. Sawum continued his work, listening carefully without drawing attention. Suddenly, one of the men turned toward him in irritation. Without warning, a sharp slap struck Sawum across the face. The impact snapped his head aside, but he offered no resistance. Blood trickled down his skin as he lowered his gaze. The guard's anger intensified, offended by the boy's silence. He assumed Sawum had suddenly become mute. Sawum responded by feigning confusion, his expression blank and unfocused. Convinced the boy was pretending to be stupid, the man grabbed him roughly by his clothes and berated him further. Finally, he pointed toward a horse and ordered Sawum to take it out for a walk. Sawum bowed clumsily, stammering just enough to sell the act. Annoyed by his inability to speak properly, the guard dismissed him. Sawum led the horse through the village, passing crowded streets and a lively marketplace. Merchants shouted their offers, people bargained loudly, and stalls overflowed with goods. His eyes took everything in: paths, faces, routines, escape routes. Every detail was etched into his mind with cold precision. Then a subtle movement caught his attention. From a nearby alley, a group of children watched him in silence, their eyes filled with cruel curiosity. One of the children suddenly hurled a stone. It struck Sawum squarely on the head. Pain flared as blood streamed down his face. The children burst into laughter, mocking him and shouting insults without restraint. For a brief moment, something terrifying slipped through the cracks. Sawum turned slowly. The air around him shifted, and for a split second his presence darkened, his red eyes burning with unrestrained fury. The children froze. One boy rubbed his eyes, unsure whether what he had seen was real. Then it vanished. Sawum immediately returned to his vacant expression, acting as though nothing had happened. He showed no reaction, no anger, no confusion. Turning away, he continued leading the horse forward. Encouraged by his silence, the children resumed their insults, throwing more objects as they laughed and ran off. Sawum ignored it all. His head remained lowered, his steps calm and even. Words no longer reached him. Elsewhere, Makiel complained loudly while cleaning weapons, cursing Dongwu and the extra work left behind. Irritation knotted him as he made his way toward Dongwu's room, half wondering whether the brute might truly be dead. When he opened the door, shock spread across his face. Sawum stepped out calmly. Inside, every weapon had been meticulously cleaned and neatly arranged. The sight left Michiel unsettled. A troubling thought crossed his mind. Had the boy finished Dongwu's work and his own as well? Sawum said nothing, staring at him with an unreadable expression. Michiel assumed the near-death experience had finally changed the boy. Perhaps fear had succeeded where cruelty had failed. As that thought settled, Sawum extended a small pouch toward him. Michiel opened it and his eyes widened. The pouch was heavy with coins, payment earned through labor. The gesture stunned him. Then laughter spilled out. Convinced the boy had finally learned how the world functioned, he took the money with rough approval and walked away in high spirits. From a distance, Sawum watched in silence. His gaze remained cold as he noted the irony. Michiel did not realize he had just taken his own money back. Walking through the city, Michiel admired the weight of the coin pouch in his hand. His mood lifted further as he decided to enjoy himself that night, skipping his usual routine. After all, the day had turned out better than expected. Soon he arrived at a large building and tossed the coin pouch into the air with playful satisfaction. A man stationed at the entrance greeted him warmly, recognizing him at once. Michiel made his request clear with a leering grin. Though briefly surprised, the man accepted after confirming the details. The exchange carried unspoken intent. Coins changed hands and Michiel was directed toward a room at the far end of the second floor. Left alone inside, Michiel waited impatiently. Moments later, a woman entered the room. Her beauty stunned him, far exceeding his expectations. Nervous excitement took hold as she approached. She knelt gracefully, preparing to serve him, and Machiel's grin widened as he welcomed it without hesitation. Unseen by him, a single red eye observed everything through a small hole in the wall. Every movement inside the room was monitored with unwavering focus. The one watching from the shadows was Sawum. His expression remained dark, controlled, and utterly merciless. The scene shifted back to the front desk, where the receptionist calmly directed another visitor toward the second floor. As he watched Machiel disappear down the corridor, a wave of disgust stirred within him. The thought of Machiel chasing a girl young enough to be his own daughter turned his stomach. Even so, his attention soon drifted to the pouch of coins resting in his hand. After a brief pause, he convinced himself that money carried no guilt of its own. With a satisfied smile, he pocketed it without hesitation. Moments later, a dark silhouette appeared at the doorway. Confused, the receptionist squinted, recognition dawning before he could fully process it. The young warrior stepped forward without invitation. Annoyance flickered across the man's face as he rose to confront the intruder, clearly offended by the interruption. His expression hardened as he warned the boy that he had overstepped his place. In response, the young man slowly produced a pouch of coins identical to the one Machiel had offered earlier. With deliberate awkwardness, he pretended to stammer while indicating a specific girl. Greed immediately smothered the receptionist's irritation. He accepted the pouch eagerly, opening it to confirm that it was filled with coins, just like the first. The realization struck quickly. Tonight promised double profit. Without further objection, he gestured toward a second room at the end of the hallway and allowed the boy to pass. With the path cleared, Sawsum moved soundlessly toward his destination. Inside the room, Machiel was distracted, oblivious to the presence slipping in behind him as a shadow crossed the doorway. Instinct reacted too late. Sawsum struck without hesitation, looping a cloth around Machiel's neck and tightening it with brutal precision. Panic surged as Machiel's breath was cut off, his body thrashing uselessly while strength drained rapidly from his limbs. Fear filled his eyes as the truth settled in. There would be no escape. Sawsum showed no restraint. A savage punch slammed into Machiel's face, followed instantly by a crushing knee strike that sent his body flying across the room. The red glow in Sawsum's eye burned fiercely as he advanced, delivering merciless blows to the helpless man. Desperation was the last emotion reflected in Machiel's gaze. Moments later, his body went completely limp. The struggle ended. Sawsum briefly gripped Machiel's face, confirming the absence of life. After ending the man's life, the MC's face was filled with quiet satisfaction. Turning to the side, his gaze drifted toward the woman lying nearby, sleeping peacefully, unaware of everything that had just occurred. He rose slowly from the ground and walked toward the half-clothed figure, stopping beside her. His expression remained cold, devoid of emotion, like that of a seasoned killer. Looking down at her, he reached a conclusion without hesitation. She was an herbivore, someone lacking both the will and the strength to protect herself. With that judgment made, he lost interest. Leaving her untouched, he turned away. He walked toward the wooden door and stopped in front of it. Without speaking a word, his eyes shifted to the narrow hole in the room. He placed his hand against the wooden surface and stood there in silence, preparing for what came next. He leaned against the surface and activated his final step. The body vanished into his inventory without leaving even the faintest trace. A sense of satisfaction settled in. The earlier practice had paid off. This ability would prove invaluable in future hunts. Suddenly, a realization surfaced. Turning slightly, Sawsum focused. As expected, the familiar blue status screen appeared. His experience bar had increased. The confirmation was undeniable. Eliminating people in this world granted experience points. With enough accumulation, leveling up became inevitable. Sam's red eyes gleamed, reflecting the promise of limitless power. Strength in this world had no ceiling. With more power, hunting would grow easier, faster, more efficient. Growth was boundless for anyone willing to seize it. Content with this realization, he lowered himself to the floor, letting his thoughts settle. Revenge was far from complete, but the path forward was now unmistakably clear. A terrifying calm replaced the violence that had burned within him. Elsewhere, Mel's younger brother, the receptionist, paced impatiently along the hallway. Moments later, Angang rushed toward him, clearly late. Confusion flickered across her face when questioned, but she was quickly ordered inside, apologizing nervously as she disappeared through the doorway. Unease began to creep in. The receptionist frowned, troubled by the prolonged silence from the room. Something felt wrong. After a brief pause, he approached the door and knocked. Expecting a response, he received none. Irritation turned to anger as he called out repeatedly, met only with silence. Then a scream shattered the hallway, sharp and piercing. Horror surged through him as he burst through the door without hesitation. Inside, Chosen was curled up on the bed, shaking violently in terror. The full scene unfolded before his eyes. From the ceiling hung a dark figure, swaying slowly. Lifeless feet dangled in the air. It was Mel. The sight froze him in place. Fear and disbelief flooded his mind as he stared at his brother's corpse, unable to comprehend who could commit such a monstrous act. Somewhere in the shadows, the predator had already moved on. The story shifted to Anhui. To the north flowed the Huai River, while the Yangtze River cut through the center, together shaping a vast and fertile plain. Since ancient times, this land had been renowned for its rich soil and dense network of rivers and lakes, conditions that allowed commerce and trade to thrive. And where wealth gathered, trouble inevitably followed. Bandits and unorthodox factions began running rampant. Many rose to oppose them. Clans and sects devoted to upholding the laws of Murim were established across Anhui. Among them stood two names above the rest: the Namgong clan, one of the 5 great clans of the Central Plains and the strongest sect in Anhui, and the Danli clan. Though the Danli clan could not rival Namgong in sheer prestige, it possessed something equally feared: its specialized combat force, the Cross Heavens Sword Division, and more importantly, its intelligence and law enforcement arm, the Black Crow Squad. Through ruthless efficiency and unmatched coordination, the Black Crow Squad earned a reputation that spread throughout Anhui. Their information-gathering abilities were so formidable that even the Beggar Sect, a faction that prided itself on knowing everything worth knowing, reluctantly admitted inferiority, at least within Anhui. Yet recently, even the Black Crow Squad had encountered a problem it could not easily explain. Inside the headquarters, a subordinate bowed deeply as he presented a scroll to his superior. The man receiving it was Gyo, the leader of the Black Crow Squad. As his eyes scanned the contents, a grim thought surfaced. Another suicide. It had become a plague. Over the past few months, nearly 100 people had taken their own lives. Suicides had always occurred, but never at this scale. 1 or 2 a month had once been considered normal. This was something else entirely, something deeply wrong. What unsettled him most was not the number, but the perfection of the cases. Every scene was flawless. Every piece of evidence aligned perfectly. Each circumstance pointed unmistakably towards suicide, leaving no cracks, no contradictions, no room for doubt. Gyo's eyes narrowed as a chilling question formed in his mind. What kind of force could make death look this clean? But was such a thing truly possible? Breaking the heavy silence, Gyo questioned his subordinate about the origin of the case, asking who the first to have died. The subordinate answered that it was an armory artisan affiliated with the Danli clan, a man named Mas Chill. Gyo's eyes sharpened immediately. He asked whether the man belonged to the Danli clan. The confirmation came without hesitation. Gyo unconsciously tightened his grip around his own throat as he visualized the act, then asked where Mas Chill had supposedly taken his own life. The subordinate gestured toward the heart of the town and reported that it occurred at an inn known as the Phoenix Tavern. Gyo rose at once and declared they would go there immediately. His subordinate was startled and questioned whether there was any need for the squad leader to go personally. Peering through the doorway, Gyo's expression hardened. He stated that he had to see it with his own eyes. Sometime later, they arrived at the Phoenix Tavern, a bustling establishment overflowing with noise and life. Standing before a closed room, Gyo asked if this was the location. A man dressed in a red tunic bowed and confirmed it, explaining that he and Cho Sion had discovered Mas Chill hanging from the rafters inside that very room. Gyo stared at the door in silence, his thoughts racing. If the suicide plague was in truth a series of murders, then the most important question remained unanswered. How did the culprit enter this room to kill Mas Chill? There was only one way to find out. Inside, the room was dim and entirely wooden, the windows tightly boarded shut. Gyo stepped in, his expression grave, and began a meticulous inspection. He examined every corner, lowering himself to the floor to inspect the boards for hidden signs. From the doorway, one of his men reported that every nook and cranny had been searched, and that there was no possible way for an intruder to enter unseen. Gyo placed his hand against the wooden wall. If that was the case, then only one possibility remained. His sharp gaze fixed on the seams between the vertical wooden logs that formed the wall. He slowly ran his hand along the surface, considering the implication. If those logs were removed, it would create a clear passage. Yet as he studied the wood more closely, a contradiction emerged. The surface was pristine. These logs had never been removed. Lifting his gaze toward the ceiling, Gyo asked whether it was possible to take out the logs without dismantling the roof. The subordinate answered immediately that it was impossible. The logs were secured within grooves connected to both the ceiling and the floor beams. Without removing the beams themselves, there was no conceivable way to extract them. The room offered no answers, and that absence was the most unsettling clue of all. Confronted with an impossible puzzle, Jideo clenched his fist, a quiet thought forming in his mind as doubt deepened. He questioned whether it had truly been a suicide. Turning back to his men, he asked whether anyone had been staying in the room next door at the time of Maschil's death. The subordinate in red confirmed that there had indeed been another guest, someone who had likely arrived around the same time as Maschil. Jideho's eyes widened slightly, anticipation sharpening his expression. He demanded the name. The subordinate answered that it was Sosam of the Danri clan. The scene shifted. Dongbong, now known as Sosam, walked calmly through a village, leading a horse by the reins. His attention rested on the invisible status window before him, where every attribute was marked only with question marks. He reflected on the experience points gained from the men he had killed near the inn, noting that they far exceeded those obtained from his earlier victims. A cold realization settled in. That man had been a martial artist. His grip tightened around the reins as his understanding of the system deepened. Eliminating stronger individuals granted greater experience. However, he also recognized the danger. Facing a true martial artist in his current state would result in certain defeat. His thoughts continued with cold clarity. Even the weakest warrior of the Danri clan surpassed him in strength. What he needed were targets that existed between commoners and martial artists, prey capable of bridging that gap, just like the one he had killed before. Suddenly, a loud, jeering voice shattered the calm. A mocking greeting echoed through the street, commenting that it had been a long time and remarking sarcastically on how handsome Sosam had become. A group of thugs stepped forward, blocking his path. Their leader sneered, addressing him by name and mocking him for failing to greet his elders properly. Dongbong remained silent as their laughter continued. One of the thugs leaned forward, calling out to another with crude amusement. The leader responded with exaggerated sarcasm, claiming there was no way their little Sosam would dare act out of line. As the group closed in, Dongbongu's eyes narrowed, cold disdain settling into their gaze. His thoughts dismissed them instantly. Street thugs. As a fist swung toward him, one of the thugs mocked that no matter how worthless Sosam was, he was still a member of the clan. Dongbongu endured the beating in silence, an internal smirk forming despite the pain. A cold thought surfaced, questioning whether the original Sosam truly spent his life being trampled by trash like this. Another strike landed, followed by an angry shout demanding to know whether he was ignoring them. The thugs loomed over him, irritation growing. They decided it was time for something more private. Declaring that they needed a little chat with their Sosam, they dragged him toward a dark alley. Nearby, the horse whinnied anxiously as its reins slipped from his grasp. Even as he was hauled away, Dongbong's eyes burned with calm calculation. He considered whether killing them all on the spot and staging it as suicide was possible. The thought continued. If the bodies were stored in his inventory and discarded elsewhere, it might work, but causing a disturbance here carried the risk of exposure. A decision formed quickly. The experience gained from killing them would be negligible. Enduring the beating for now and dealing with them later was the better option. A heavy punch slammed into him, and a thug mocked that he looked plumper than before, suggesting he had been living comfortably. The assault continued until a sudden voice cut through the darkness, ordering them to stop. A man with long hair stepped out from the shadows, wearing a sly, amused smile. He scolded the thugs, reminding them that they had been told to bring the boy politely. The lead thug froze in terror, stammering the name Jang Ho with obvious fear. From the ground, Dongbong recognized the name as well. Jang Ho ignored the violence entirely and approached the horse, gently stroking its mane. He praised it as a fine animal and casually revealed his intention. The leader of their underground society had an obsession with horses, and he planned to offer this one as a gift. Still petting the horse, Zhang Ho turned his gaze toward Dongbong and asked for his opinion. A greedy, sinister smile spread across Zhang Ho's face. Dongbong understood immediately. The killing intent was unmistakable. The truth became clear. Zhang Ho's goal from the beginning had been simple. He intended to kill him and take the horse. What he failed to realize was that he had chosen the wrong prey. Noticing the silence, Zhang Ho remarked that the boy seemed lost in thought. Then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping into a cold threat, making it clear that he did not repeat himself. Dongbong lifted his head, his expression calm, defiant, and completely unshaken. He replied that Zhang Ho should simply kill him and stop pretending to ask. The response stunned the surrounding thugs. One of them blurted out in disbelief that the boy could speak. In that instant of shock, Dongbong moved. Brilliant blue energy erupted around his body, surging outward as a vortex of light. With a single word, the command activated. The light intensified violently, releasing a powerful shock wave that tore through the alley. A scream of pain echoed as the energy swallowed one of the thugs whole. Zhang Ho could only stare in disbelief as blood splattered across his face. His thoughts, a knife pierced through the man's chest, warm blood streaming down his hands as his body went limp. Horror spread through the thugs as the horse was lifted into the air, dragged helplessly into the glowing void. Another violent burst of energy exploded outward, this time tinged with an ominous pink hue. One of the men was flung backward, screaming as chains manifested and wrapped around him. A familiar system window appeared before Dongbong. Murim online. A notification followed immediately. Level up. Then again, level up. Sweat streamed down thugs' faces. Terror consumed him where Dongbong had once stood. There was now only a dark, monstrous silhouette crackling with a swirling red and black aura. The lead thug's face twisted in pure horror as he screamed that the boy was a demon. His first instinct was to flee panic, overwhelming reason. Then fear turned into desperation. He shouted for everyone to attack, bellowing for them to kill the demons standing before them. The hopeless bandit panicked as he wondered what was happening, running through the dark alley at full speed. He stumbled suddenly, but forced himself to keep moving. As he looked ahead and saw that he was nearly out of the alley, he questioned what that thing chasing him could possibly be. Fear tightened his chest and stomach, and he shouted desperately for help. In the next instant, one of his legs disappeared, and he screamed as he lost his balance and collapsed onto the ground. He cried out again, but no one responded. As his vision began to blur, he stretched out his hand in disbelief, thinking that this could not be real and wondering if he was about to die. He thought of himself as nothing more than a loser, a living money bag that only shook and handed over cash when beaten. When he tried to crawl away, the MC approached from behind, his shadow falling over him. As the bandit looked up, terror consumed him, and he thought that he had only been trying to do a favor and earn some money as he always did. That was all he believed he had done. In response, the MC struck him, rendering him unconscious. Afterward, the MC seized his collar. As the man reflected on how unjust everything felt, he was dragged back into the depths of the alley. His thoughts spiraled as he became convinced that he would die at the hands of a demon who appeared painfully ordinary. After some time, deep within the darkest part of the alley, a voice was heard as someone rummaged through belongings. The noise gradually grew louder until the bandit suddenly jolted awake, gasping for air. The MC looked down at him and remarked that he was finally awake. The bandit, now tightly bound, called him a demon. Fear seeped through his body as the MC stepped closer. Unable to meet his gaze, the bandit trembled while the MC placed a knife near his neck, sweat streaming down his face. Then the MC asked who the man was, the one who had died first after acting tough. Panic overtook the bandit, and he struggled to respond, his face drenched in sweat, as he asked whether the MC was referring to Zhang Ho. The MC confirmed that it was Zhang Ho, and recalled that he had mentioned something earlier, something called black. At that moment, the man screamed in terror and revealed that it was the Black Snake, specifically the Black Snake Society. When the MC asked what the Black Snake Society was, the man hurriedly explained that it was one of the ebony syndicates that controlled the black alleys of Bonghang, and that Zhang Ho had been an executive within the organization. As the MC pressed the knife closer to his neck, he reacted with surprise at the revelation that Zhang Ho had held such a position. Shortly after, he recalled another detail and stated that Zhang Ho had also mentioned something about the leader of the Black Snake Society. The man panicked and shouted in fear that it was true, repeatedly identifying the leader of the Black Snake Society as Bang Poyam. He frantically stated that Bang Poyam had been the one who ordered Zhang Hao to kill Master Sosum and retrieve the horse. The MC's expression hardened as he realized that the Ebony Syndicates and the Black Snake Society operated under a clear hierarchy with a single leader. He understood that in modern terms, they were little more than organized gangs. The MC smiled and stepped closer. The bandit appeared to accept his fate, as the MC informed him that he would be required to reveal everything he knew about the Ebony Syndicate and the Black Snake Society, and that he would be allowed to live if the information proved useful. At those words, the man's spirits rose, his expression brightening as he realized that survival was being offered. He stammered and asked whether it was true. In the next moment, his lifeless body lay on the ground, blood spreading across the alley floor. A hand hovered above the corpse as the MC activated his inventory. As light spread, he sighed and questioned whether that was everything, wondering if he had cleaned up all the mess he had caused. When he surveyed his surroundings, no bodies remained on the ground. Only his horse stood nearby. He then sat on the bare earth and calmly reviewed the information he had obtained from the so-called bandits. The Ebony Syndicate had revealed itself. He had been searching for prey to help him level up targets that existed somewhere between civilians and martial artists, and he had found them by chance. His gaze hardened as he resolved that from that moment on, he would prepare to hunt these people as his chosen targets. The thought of leveling up crossed his mind. When he looked at his hands, he noticed that they had fully recovered. He realized that all his previous wounds had healed the moment he leveled up, not only the scars on his hands, but every injury across his body. His gaze grew contemplative as he wondered whether this ability could even heal damage to vital organs, such as the heart or the brain. He clenched his fists and sensed that he was close to leveling up again. He considered that taking a certain level of risk might be acceptable. Recalling the light that had filled the alley during his earlier breakthrough, he recognized this as the disadvantage of leveling up. It was not only visually conspicuous, but likely to attract danger. As he reflected on this, he concluded that it had to be concealed. The method of killing through his inventory was no exception, and he understood that he must never be seen. A hunter hiding among prey had to appear completely ordinary. Only by looking indistinguishable from everyone else could one become the ultimate hunter. So Psalm decided that leveling up should only happen after a hunt was over, or in a place where no one but prey was present. After organizing his thoughts, he rose from the ground, grasped the horse's reins, and led it out of the valley. As he walked, city lights reflected across his body. He reflected that Zhang Ho had been slightly more cautious or stronger. He himself could have been placed in serious danger. He realized that pretending to be mute was no longer camouflage. To survive in the city, he would need to grow stronger without revealing himself. As he blended into the streets and mixed among the people around him, he came to a clear conclusion about what needed to be done. He understood that he would have to kill stronger and stronger opponents. At that moment, the scene abruptly changed. Someone seized him by the shoulder and asked if he was Psalm. His eyes widened in shock when he realized that the person was the leader of one of the two great clans. The man regarded him with lethal intent and demanded to know whether he was the one who had killed Ma Chill. In the next instant, he felt an overwhelming pressure surge from the hand gripping his shoulder. Moving back in time, a system panel materialized and reported that a critical error had occurred in the Murim online system. It stated that there should be no issue with continuing the game. This notification surprised him, as the error had appeared immediately after he reached level 2. He found himself back at the stable, watching the system panel closely. He realized the cause was likely related to his own existence. Since both the game system and someone who should not originally exist within it were operating simultaneously, the problem had to stem from that discrepancy. Resting his hands on his jaw, he reflected that his presence alone was already a critical error. After interacting with the panel, the display suddenly switched to the status screen, showing attack power, intelligence, quests, equipment, and items. He examined it carefully, trying to understand each category. He noticed that the stats, which had previously appeared as question marks, had changed into gauge bars. This made him suspect that the change was also related to the critical error, reasoning that in reality, not everything could be quantified as precisely as in a game. He then selected the skills option. The panel immediately shifted to display the skills available to him. As he studied the list, he saw abilities such as slash and stab, which were offensive techniques. On the other side were block and throw, also included in his skill set. He quickly recognized these as passive skills, typically generated during character creation, a well-known pattern among players. However, his attention was drawn to the final entry. His gaze lingered on it, and curiosity surfaced as he examined the unfamiliar name. Spirit Eye. It was a technique he had never encountered during his time playing the game. There was no separate description provided, which made him question the nature and purpose of the skill even more. When the skill was selected, the system immediately reported that the activation conditions for Spirit Eye had been met, and that the skill was being cast automatically. This announcement caught him completely off guard as a countdown began. The timer started at 20. He sprang to his feet in panic, unable to comprehend what was happening. At 16, the system notified him that an individual with a level difference of 10 or more had entered a 20-meter radius. He wondered if the skill functioned as some kind of early warning system. As the countdown continued, he sensed multiple presences drawing closer. When it reached 13, he realized he could clearly hear footsteps coming from outside. By 12, there was nothing he could do. He clenched his fists and waited, steadying his gaze as the counter dropped to 11, convincing himself that it was likely not an enemy. At 10, he reasoned that very few people would dare to trespass into the Danri clan. If intruders truly were present, they would not be moving at such a slow pace. When the count reached 9, the footsteps were already close to the door. He concluded that the approaching figure had to be an expert from the clan. Although he did not fully understand what a level difference meant, he knew the gap had to be overwhelming, considering the struggle and danger it had taken just to reach level 2. He questioned how many ordinary people would need to be killed to reach level 10. Thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands. Then he felt it. The aura, the crushing pressure carried within the footsteps of the unseen man. It made him understand that the strength before him equaled the weight of all those lives combined. At 4, he closed his eyes and accepted his fate. Within the Danri clan, he was nothing more than an insignificant existence. The countdown continued until it finally reached 1. The door burst open and 2 shadowy figures entered. One of them was identified as the leader of one of the 2 great clans. When his gaze met Sosam's, their eyes locked. The man looked down at him calmly before reaching out with his left hand and gripping Sosam's shoulder, asking whether he was Sosam. Sosam responded with a silent nod, maintaining the act of being mute. The man then coldly asked whether he was the one who had killed Makio. Sosam remained silent. Sweat streamed down his face as the hand on his shoulder began to emit a faint blue glow. Without warning, the light flared violently. Sosam felt unbearable pain as the man's hand crackled like thunder, the sensation surging through his entire body. He could no longer endure it and screamed as the man's eyes and hand continued to shine ominously. Lightning-like waves of energy rippled through his bones, crawling along his ribs and radiating outward. His eyes and flesh felt as though they were burning as the force drove straight into his abdomen, into the core where energy should have resided. After some time, the man obtained his answer. He could sense it clearly. Sosam's core was completely dark and empty, showing no trace of cultivation. The man slowly withdrew his hand. Sosam's expression returned to that of a mute, though inwardly he questioned what had just been done to him. The clan leader stood still for a moment, releasing a quiet breath. Then he turned to his companion and stated that it was time to leave, abandoning Sosam in the stable. The companion reacted with surprise but followed. As he did, he glanced back and saw Sosam still standing there, unmoving, silently watching them depart. Despite his stillness, his expression carried a chilling intensity, as though he were ready to kill at any moment. As Sosam remained alone, his gaze grew darker. His eyes slowly began to glow red, deepening with each passing moment, until the darkness seemed to swallow the stable around him. Outside the stable, the companion questioned why the clan leader had left without conducting a proper interrogation, asking whether the boy had not been suspicious. The clan leader responded that the boy was indeed suspicious, which was precisely why internal energy had been injected into his body earlier. He explained that if the boy had practiced martial arts, even slightly, traces would have remained. With a grave expression, the companion asked about the result of the test. The clan leader coldly replied that the boy was empty. He did not possess even a fragment of internal energy and was nothing more than an ordinary person who had never learned martial arts. The clan leader then stopped and looked up at the moon, wondering whether all those deaths had truly been suicides rather than murders. If it had been a plague, he questioned how many more lives would be lost before it finally ended. Under the eerily shining moon, contrary to Gidayo's concerns, the suicide plague disappeared from Bongyang as though an unseen will had answered his unspoken worries. Soon after, a new current of slaughter swept across the city. On a rainy day in Bongyang, beneath a full moon illuminating rows of ancient buildings, one restaurant remained as lively as ever. Voices spilled out into the street, while inside, patrons ate and drank as waiters rushed between tables, calling out orders. Among the guests sat a man already half drunk. He slammed his cup onto the table and released a heavy sigh before asking his companion whether he had heard the story. The middle-aged man across from him asked whether he meant the nameless swordsman. The drunk man declared that it was impossible not to have heard of him. He insisted that he should be called the Great Nameless Swordsman, boasting that he was slaughtering members of the Ebony Syndicate. His companion hurriedly urged him to lower his voice, warning him of the consequences if the wrong people overheard. The drunk man ignored the caution, shouting that he wanted everyone to hear. He went on to say that among the so-called powerful Ebony Syndicate factions, the White Tiger Unit and the Red Wolf set had already been completely wiped out. The middle-aged man warned him that there were still territories untouched, adding that if members of the Black Snake Society heard such words, the outcome would be disastrous. The drunk man merely laughed and formed crude hand signs with his fists, declaring that their time would come soon as well, and that the Great Nameless Swordsman would completely crush them. The loud exchange drew the attention of several nearby patrons, including a mysterious figure wearing a cloak and a straw hat. Without speaking, the man rose and left the restaurant. His face was partially concealed by a glove and the shadow cast by the brim of his hat. Wearing worn, tattered shoes with faint markings visible along his legs, he stepped onto the rain-soaked ground and vanished into the night. As he moved through the rain, he passed a beggar sitting exposed to the wind and downpour, allowing the rain to drench his body. When the man walked past, the beggar slowly lifted his head, his eyes glowing faintly as he watched him disappear. A sudden clap of thunder echoed through the night, and the scene abruptly reset. The mysterious man was now standing before the Black Snake sect. Night consumed the surroundings as relentless rain battered the gates of the Black Snake Society. One guard had fallen asleep on duty. Another arrived seething with anger and struck the sleeper hard on the head, berating him for daring to sleep at a time like this. The first guard jolted awake in panic and apologized repeatedly. The stricter guard warned him to stay alert, reminding him that chaos had spread because of the nameless wanderer. He explained that 3 members of the Black faction had already been wiped out, all 3 eliminated, leaving only the Black Serpent Society. As he continued speaking, an unsettling stillness crept in. He realized the other guard had fallen asleep again. Fury surged. He shouted, cursed him, and accused him of drifting off once more. Then his voice stalled. The guard was dead. Fresh blood stained the ground, the wound clean, precise, as though a sword had passed through moments earlier. The strict guard froze, the truth striking him harder than his earlier blow. This could only be the work of the wandering warrior with no name. Before the thought could settle, Sawom appeared behind him. A blade flashed. His throat was slit in a single practiced motion. Both guards collapsed, their bodies hitting the ground almost politely, as if even death followed proper order. The killer remained still, gazing coldly at the corpses, unimpressed with the result. Sawom then moved into the Black Snake Society. He walked casually as the rain continued to fall in heavy sheets. His pace never changed. Then he sensed something rushing toward him at full speed. He looked up and saw arrows tearing through the rain, fired straight at him. He shifted backward with calm precision, evading every incoming shaft before any could touch him. Once the last arrow struck the ground, he lifted his gaze and looked toward the direction they had been fired from. Inside, numerous figures waited for him, weapons drawn, swords, daggers, knives, and anything sharp enough to qualify as ambition. Sawam became alert immediately. An elder stepped forward and drew his sword, clearly having expected this encounter. He identified Sawam as the cursed nameless rat they had been waiting for. Arrows were already embedded in the ground before him, a silent warning delivered ahead of schedule. Sawam did not respond. He stood in silence, his face concealed, as though words were unnecessary when steel had already done so much talking. A thunderclap tore through the sky, loud enough to shake resolve and patience alike. The elder took it as his cue and ordered his subordinates to kill him, commanding them to finish the bastard at once. They charged together, weapons raised, rushing Sawam in a chaotic wave. In response, he activated his skill, the sweep of 1,000 soldiers. His sword moved once, clean and overwhelming. Heads fell almost simultaneously, bodies collapsing before the sound of steel fully faded. A handful survived. They stood motionless, shock rooting them to the ground. The main character continued cutting through them effortlessly, sweeping them aside like insects led to slaughter. His eyes glowed a pure crimson as he carved his way forward, each strike precise and merciless. Blood splashed across the ground with every motion, marking his path as no one could stop his advance. One of them, trembling violently, asked his superior what they should do next. The boss screamed at him to move, declaring that he would kill the bastard himself. Confidence returned to his voice, apparently unaware it was already overdue. He rushed forward. Sawam seized one man and lifted him effortlessly. At the same time, he caught the charging attacker, dragging both of them together. His sword drove straight through their stomachs in a single motion. Death came instantly, their faces frozen in disbelief, as though they had expected negotiations instead. From behind, a bald man lunged at Sawam, shouting insults and calling him a slippery bastard, boasting that he had finally caught him and reducing the moment to trash talk. Sawam turned his gaze toward him. As he attempted to draw his sword, they gripped it tightly, preventing the blade from leaving their body. The bald man smirked and ordered him to stand still and hand over his head, apparently confident that confidence alone qualified a strategy. Sawam activated his inventory, drew a blade from behind his back, and sliced the man's throat open. The body fell before the smirk had time to regret its timing. The remaining men stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a blade had appeared where no weapon had existed moments earlier. Sawam glared at them, his gaze heavy with death. Taking advantage of that brief moment of distraction, an elderly man hurled a dagger with desperate precision. The blade struck Sawam directly in stomach. The dagger struck deep, blood spilling instantly as Sawam dropped to his knees. The elderly man watched with satisfaction, a smug smile forming as he took pride in finally landing a decisive blow. He reflected that Sawam had slaughtered their men so mercilessly that everyone had begun to believe he was some kind of monster. Yet now, kneeling and bleeding, he appeared no different from any other human, one who could be killed. The remaining men stared at Sawam, unsettling smiles spreading across their faces as hope crept back into their expressions. Then Sawam gripped the dagger lodged in his stomach and tore it out with his bare hand. He began to laugh, the sound loud and unrestrained. The men froze, disbelief overtaking them as they struggled to understand why a wounded man on his knees was laughing. Sawam lifted his head and gave them a smile that drained the warmth from the air. His eyes turned red. In the next instant, he charged forward, gripping two daggers, moving like a starving beast unleashed upon its prey. Terror erupted as screams echoed through the society, loud enough to be heard beyond its walls. Elsewhere, another man panicked as the screams began to fade. He bit his nails, ground his teeth, and clawed at his hair, while checking their remaining strength. Only 13% remained. Fear consumed him. He questioned whether a single person was truly going to wipe them all out. Desperation pushed him to justify their actions in his mind. They had only extorted people a little. They had only trafficked humans, sold women for alcohol, committed acts that no longer felt extreme once repeated often enough. He told himself they had only killed things that barely looked human. Even so, terror crushed those excuses. He accepted that far worse people existed in the world and that one of them was now hunting them down. He concluded there was no escape except killing Sawam where he stood. With trembling resolve, he pointed toward a back alley and explained that it led to Paradise Mansion, the residence of the society's leader. He deliberately lured Sarwam in that direction, convinced the darkness would grant them the advantage. As he glanced toward the mansion, he noticed several figures already concealed within the shadows, positioned and waiting, prepared to ambush him. Soon after, Sarwam stepped out of the Black Snake Society. The order was given immediately, and arrows were released in unison. A dense barrage tore through the air toward him. Sarwam leapt upward, twisting through the rain and narrowly evading every arrow. From a distance, the man lost sight of him and began to wonder if he had finally been killed. No one truly knew who Sarwam was, or even what gender he might be, as his entire body remained concealed beneath dark coverings. Then a scream erupted from their base. Another followed. One by one, they witnessed Sarwam cutting down each man, throats opened with effortless precision. The observer stood frozen, horror locking his limbs as he watched the slaughter unfold. Even so, he clenched his sword and stepped forward, forcing himself to face Sarwam. He realized then that everyone else was likely already dead. Fear and desperation crushed his remaining resolve, and the truth became impossible to deny. Sarwam was the nameless wanderer. He struggled to understand what Sarwam wanted or why he had come for them at all, unable to grasp what they had done to deserve such an end. When his gaze met Sarwam's blood-red eyes, shock and terror seized him completely. He screamed in defiance, denying that Sarwam was any god of death and demanding to know what right he had to act this way. Before the words could finish leaving his mouth, Sarwam moved. A blade flashed and his throat was sliced open. His head struck the ground a heartbeat later, separating from the body in a single brutal motion. Sarwam's intent became unmistakably clear. He desired only one thing: their lives. The scene widened to reveal the aftermath. The entire area lay drowned in corpses. Blood spread in every direction. Bodies lay scattered across the ground, each throat cut with precise efficiency. As Sarwam stood amid the carnage, observing the stillness he had created, a faint smirk surfaced on his face. It was then revealed that he was none other than Bang Pu, the leader of the Black Snake Society himself. He reflected that his first targets had been the White Tiger Gang. Django had been killed early on, granting him his first level up, though at the time he had still been far weaker than them. To compensate, he had relied on lures and arson to draw them out. Ambush followed ambush, each one carefully planned. By the time Bak Ho, the leader of the White Tiger Gang, finally understood what was happening, more than half of his men were already dead. Throughout that process, officers and villagers began whispering a name born from fear and confusion. Sarwam came to be known as the Nameless Wanderer. After acquiring the mask bearing that name, eliminating members of the Black faction became significantly easier. When he finally killed the leader of the White Tiger Gang, level reached 5. At that moment, he obtained his first active skills. A system window appeared, informing him that new abilities had been learned. King Gong was acquired. The 3-power sword technique was acquired. The system window then closed. His status displayed Catfish Jesse, level 11, with 14% progress. King Gong was listed as a martial technique that lightened the body. Currently applied at level 0, level 1 unlocked, with 0% mastery. The 3-power sword technique showed its first move, Sweep of 1,000 Soldiers, described as a powerful horizontal cutting technique, currently applied at level 1 with 0% mastery. Sarwam smirked as he contemplated the power of the 3-power sword technique. At last, he was able to confront the Black faction head-on. By the time children began playing games inspired by the warrior known as the Nameless Wanderer, the Red Wolf cult had already been erased from existence. In Ding Yong, the only remaining members of the Black faction were those of the Black Serpent Society. Meanwhile, somewhere within the Black Snake Society, a man sat calmly with his blade resting at his side. He was an old man with long white hair, known as Bang Poyam, the leader of the Black Snake Society. He was waiting for the killer to arrive. As thunder struck, the main character suddenly appeared before him. Their gazes met and silence settled between them. The old man broke the tension by asking whether he was the nameless righteous swordsman. The man did not respond. He remained still, and the two stood facing each other without exchanging a single word. Bang Poyam laughed, mocking the idea of Sarwam being some sort of hero, gesturing at his ominous appearance. Sarwam stated calmly that he was not a hero. Bang Poyam questioned why then Sarwam had slaughtered members of the black faction. Sarwam responded with a low, unsettling laugh. His blood-red eyes glowed as he explained that he killed precisely because he was not a hero. Bang Poyam burst into laughter, declaring that Sarwam had deceived everyone in Bonang. Sarwam answered with his own eerie laughter, clarifying that he had deceived no one, and that people had chosen to believe what they wished. Bang Poyam stepped forward, sword in hand, remarking that Sarwam was an interesting individual. He admitted that even after crossing the River of Three Crosses that day, he felt no regret. A disturbing smile spread across his face as he welcomed the confrontation. Whether Sarwam truly was the nameless wanderer no longer mattered. Bang Poyam understood one thing clearly: Sarwam had come to kill him. Resolute and confident, Bang Poyam prepared to test Sarwam's strength. A blue aura erupted from his body, his eyes glowing a brilliant blue as he charged forward. At the same time, a red aura surged from Sarwam, his blood-red eyes blazing as he rushed straight toward Bang Poyam. Their swords met head-on, steel crashing violently as the clash shook the rain-soaked night. Time seemed to freeze the instant a raindrop touched the ground. The main character lunged forward with a grim smile, and the Black Snake Society leader moved at the same moment. Their blades collided with a violent clash, sending shockwaves rippling through the surrounding area. They continued exchanging strikes relentlessly, each blow carrying overwhelming force as neither yielded an inch. Poyam struck Sarwam in the stomach, tearing it open as blood spilled freely. Despite the injury, Sarwam continued attacking without hesitation, a reaction that visibly startled Poyam. In response, Poyam activated his skill, Juna Opening. He judged the timing and realized it would not fully activate in time. Even so, confidence never left his face, and a smirk formed as he launched another strike. With precise control, Poyam severed Sarwam's arm. Blood sprayed as the limb fell away. Sarwam staggered backwards, stunned before collapsing to the ground. Poyam smiled again. The expression twisted and pressed his advantage, observing that Sarwam's body was no longer in proper condition. The old man laughed and launched another attack at full speed. The strike came with crushing force, but the main character managed to block it. The assault did not stop, and the main character continued defending against each blow. Realizing he had gained the advantage, the old man's expression twisted into a grin as he pressed forward and attacked again. As Sarwam blocked the incoming blows, his focus sharpened. He realized his wounds were being deliberately targeted again and again. If this continued, defeat was inevitable, even if it meant sacrificing his own flesh to delay it. Poyam extended his tongue in mockery, questioning Sarwam's intentions before unleashing his three-pointed sword technique. Another strike landed, drawing more blood. Using the technique's full effect, Poyam wrapped a rope-like blade tightly around Sarwam, binding him completely, then severed his arm from his body. Laughing triumphantly, Poyam declared that he had finally caught him and praised the technique for working flawlessly, noting with amusement that it was his first time using a flexible sword. Then Sarwam smirked. With a sudden kick, he sent Poyam flying. Poyam crashed at a distance, skidding across the ground. Sarwam was shocked to see him stand again. Looming behind Poyam, emerging from the shadows, was a massive blue snake. Poyam smirked once more, remarking on how abnormal Sarwam truly was. Only 10% remained. He assessed the situation as though it were a hunting meal, noting that Sarwam had willingly used his own body as bait. He recognized that this was not how martial artists fought, but how an assassin or hunter operated. In a battle to the death between martial artists, the one who concealed more always held the advantage. Poyam had more to hide. Sarwam had less. That difference became Sarwam's fatal flaw. With confidence, Poyam tore open his shirt and declared that Sarwam had nothing left. It then became clear that Poyam's body itself resembled that of a snake. He merged completely with his shadow serpent, their forms blending into one. Overwhelming power surged as he rose into the air. Sarwam watched the transformation in shock. Poyam grinned and mocked him, declaring that Sarwam would die just as Linnea once had, calling him an unnamed killer ghost. Immediately after, the giant snake opened its massive jaws and lunged straight toward Sarwam.